The $500 sat in the middle of the saloon table like a small mountain of gold, and Kyle Thompson could already taste the whiskey he would buy with his winnings. "I am telling you, boys, marriage is a trap set by society, and I will never, ever fall into it," he declared, his voice carrying across the smoke-filled room of the Red River Saloon in Wichita, Kansas, on that sweltering July evening in 1878. His friends, ranch hands and cowboys who had known Kyle since he first arrived in Kansas 5 years ago, erupted into laughter. Marcus Webb, a grizzled cattleman with a scar across his left cheek, slapped his hand on the table hard enough to make the coins jump. "That is what every man says until the right woman comes along and makes him eat those words." "Not me," Kyle insisted, pushing his dark hair back from his forehead with a confident grin that had charmed more than a few saloon girls but never held his interest beyond a dance or two. "I have seen too many good men turn into henpecked husbands, giving up their freedom for someone who nags them about muddy boots and spending time with friends. My parents had that kind of marriage, and I swore at 18 I would never repeat their mistakes." "So confident," chimed in Billy Patterson, the youngest of the group at 22, barely old enough to grow a respectable mustache. "But what if you meet a woman who changes everything you think you know?" Kyle leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight, and fixed each man with a steady gaze. His blue eyes held absolute certainty. "Then I will personally give each of you $100. That is 500 total, gentlemen. I am 26 years old, and I have managed to avoid the matrimonial noose this long. I can make it the rest of my life." The bet was sealed with handshakes all around, and Kyle bought a round of drinks to celebrate what he considered easy money kept in his pocket. He worked as a horse wrangler on the Big Sky Ranch just outside Wichita, breaking wild mustangs and training them for sale. It was hard, dangerous work that suited his independent nature perfectly. He answered to no one but the ranch owner, Mr. Hastings, and he could ride off into the prairie whenever the mood struck him. That night, as Kyle walked back to his small cabin on the ranch property, the summer stars brilliant overhead, he felt nothing but satisfaction with his life choices. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, and he was as free as the wind that bent the tall grass. The very thought of being tied down to one place, one person, for the rest of his days made him shudder. What Kyle could not have known was that, at that exact moment, nearly 200 miles away in Kansas City, Missouri, a young woman named Delilah Kennedy was packing her belongings into a sturdy trunk, preparing for a journey that would change both their lives forever. Delilah had turned 21 just 3 days prior, and she had marked the occasion by making a decision that scandalized her entire family. Her father, a prominent banker, had arranged for her to marry Gerald Whitmore, a business associate twice her age with thin lips and hands that felt like dead fish when they touched hers. The wedding was scheduled for October, and everyone assumed Delilah would go along with the plan like a dutiful daughter. They were wrong. "You cannot possibly be serious about this," her mother had wailed when Delilah announced her intentions. "Going to Wichita to live with your aunt. Working in her dress shop. You are throwing away your future." "No, mother," Delilah had replied calmly, though her heart pounded with equal parts fear and excitement. "I am claiming my future. I will not marry a man I do not love just to make father happy or to secure a business deal. I would rather make my own way in the world." Her Aunt Martha, her mother's younger sister who had scandalized the family years ago by divorcing her husband and opening a business, had written to say Delilah was welcome anytime. Martha Kennedy, who had kept her maiden name out of spite and pride, ran a successful dressmaking establishment in Wichita and needed help with the growing demand for her services. So Delilah packed her most practical dresses, her sewing supplies, and the small amount of money she had saved from birthday gifts over the years. She left a note for her parents, kissed her younger brother goodbye when no one was looking, and boarded the train heading west with nothing but determination fueling her courage. The journey took 2 days, and Delilah spent much of it staring out the window at the changing landscape. Missouri's rolling hills gradually gave way to the flatter expanse of Kansas, and with each passing mile, she felt the weight of her family's expectations lifting from her shoulders. She was terrified, certainly, but also more alive than she had felt in years. Aunt Martha met her at the train station in Wichita, a whirlwind of energy despite being 45 years old. She wore a practical brown dress with minimal bustle, and her graying hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. "There is my brave girl," she said, pulling Delilah into a fierce embrace. "You look just like I did at your age, same fire in your eyes." "Thank you for taking me in," Delilah said, blinking back tears of relief and exhaustion. "Nonsense. You are doing me a favor. I have more orders than I can handle, and you were always the best seamstress in the family. Come on, let me show you your new home." Martha's dress shop occupied the ground floor of a 2-story building on Main Street, right in the heart of Wichita's growing downtown. The shop itself was neat and organized, with bolts of fabric lining the walls in every color imaginable, and a large cutting table in the center. The back room held 2 sewing machines, a luxury that made Delilah gasp with delight. Upstairs were living quarters, modest but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a sitting area. "You will take the smaller bedroom," Martha said, leading Delilah to a cozy room with a window overlooking Main Street. "It is not much, but it is yours. No one will tell you who to marry or how to live your life under this roof." Delilah set down her trunk and looked at her aunt with tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was so scared you would change your mind." "Never. I remember what it feels like to be trapped. I will not let that happen to you." Martha squeezed her niece's hands. "Now, we have work to do. Mrs. Henderson needs her Sunday dress finished by Saturday, and the mayor's wife commissioned a ball gown that is going to test every skill we possess. Think you are up for it?" "Absolutely," Delilah said, wiping her tears and squaring her shoulders. This was her new life, and she was ready to embrace it completely. The next few weeks passed in a blur of fabric, thread, and long hours bent over the sewing machines. Delilah proved to be exactly what Martha needed, with quick fingers and an eye for detail that elevated every garment they produced. Word spread quickly that the Kennedy dress shop had taken on a talented new seamstress, and the orders increased steadily. Delilah loved the work, but she also loved the freedom of her new life. She could walk down Main Street without a chaperone. She could speak to strangers without worrying about propriety. She could make her own decisions about how to spend her time and her money. It was intoxicating. On a Saturday morning in early August, Delilah was arranging spools of thread in the front window display when she heard a commotion outside. She looked up to see a crowd gathering in the street, and curiosity drew her to the door. A cowboy was in the middle of Main Street, attempting to control a massive black horse that clearly wanted no part of being ridden. The horse bucked and spun, but the cowboy stayed in the saddle with impressive skill, his body moving in perfect rhythm with the animal's attempts to unseat him. Delilah found herself holding her breath, unable to look away. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was probably only a few minutes, the horse stopped bucking and stood trembling, sides heaving. The cowboy dismounted in one smooth motion and began speaking softly to the animal, running his hands along its neck in soothing strokes. "That is Kyle Thompson," said a voice beside her. Delilah turned to see Mrs. Henderson, one of their regular customers, watching the scene with obvious appreciation. Best horse wrangler in the state, they say. Can gentle any wild thing, though Lord knows he stays plenty wild himself. He certainly seems skilled, Delilah observed, watching as Kyle continued to calm the horse. He was tall and lean, with the kind of build that came from hard physical work. Even from this distance, she could see the confident way he carried himself, the easy grace of his movements. Skilled with horses, yes. With women, he keeps his distance. Every unmarried girl in Wichita has tried to catch his eye at one point or another, but he is not interested in settling down. Married to his freedom, that one. Delilah felt a strange flutter in her chest as she watched Kyle lead the now docile horse down the street. She told herself it was simply appreciation for his horsemanship, nothing more. After all, she had not fled one unwanted marriage just to throw herself at the first handsome cowboy she saw in Wichita. Still, she found herself thinking about him as she returned to her thread display. There had been something in the way he moved, the gentle patience he showed the frightened horse, that stuck in her mind. She shook her head, laughing at herself. She was being ridiculous. That evening, as she and Martha ate dinner in their upstairs living quarters, Delilah mentioned the incident. "I saw a cowboy gentling a horse on Main Street today. Mrs. Henderson said his name was Kyle Thompson." Martha paused with her fork halfway to her mouth, an odd expression crossing her face. "Kyle Thompson. Yes, I know of him. He brings his mending to old Mrs. Walsh down the street, and he is always polite when I see him around town. Good worker by all accounts, but he has quite the reputation." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind where he has made it very clear he will never marry. Apparently, he and his friends have some kind of bet about it. The whole town knows. Every so often, some young lady decides she will be the one to change his mind, but it never works out. He is friendly enough, but he always makes sure everyone knows he is not looking for a wife." "How strange," Delilah said, feeling oddly disappointed despite herself. "Why would someone be so opposed to marriage? Same reason some people are desperate for it, I suppose. Their past experiences shape their views. From what I have heard, Kyle's parents had a miserable marriage. His father died when Kyle was young and his mother remarried badly. Twice. I think he decided he did not want any part of that institution." Delilah considered this as she finished her meal. She supposed she could understand that perspective, given that she herself had just fled an arranged marriage. But there was something sad about someone swearing off love entirely, shutting themselves away from even the possibility of finding happiness with another person. "You are thinking awfully hard about a man you just saw from a distance," Martha observed with amusement. "I am not thinking about him," Delilah protested, feeling her cheeks heat. "I was just curious, that is all." "Hum. Well, try not to be too curious. Kyle Thompson is handsome and skilled, but he is also stubbornly set in his ways. A woman could break her heart trying to change a man like that." "Good thing I am not interested in changing anyone," Delilah said firmly. "I came here to build my own life, not to chase after a man." She meant every word. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The following week, Delilah was measuring out fabric for a new order when the bell above the shop door chimed. She called out, "I will be right with you," without looking up from her work, focused on making sure her measurements were precise. "No hurry, madam. I am just looking for someone." The deep, warm voice made Delilah look up, and she found herself staring directly into the blue eyes of Kyle Thompson. Up close, he was even more striking than he had been from a distance. His sun-bronzed skin spoke of long hours outdoors, and there was a dusting of trail dust on his clothes that suggested he had ridden straight into town from the ranch. "Can I help you?" she asked, proud that her voice came out steady despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. "I am looking for the dress shop owner. I was told she might be able to help me with a problem." "That would be my aunt, but she is out making deliveries right now. I am Delilah Kennedy. Perhaps I can help you instead." Kyle removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Kyle Thompson, madam. It is nice to meet you. My problem is a bit unusual. You see, my boss at the ranch, Mr. Hastings, his wife is having a birthday next month, and he wants to surprise her with a new dress. But he does not know the first thing about women's fashion, and he asked if I would come into town and talk to the dressmaker about arranging something. I feel like a fool not knowing anything about this sort of thing." Delilah felt a smile tugging at her lips. There was something endearing about this strong, capable man looking so uncomfortable discussing dress orders. "There is no need to feel foolish. This is what we do. Tell me about Mrs. Hastings. What does she usually like to wear? Practical things, mostly." "She is a rancher's wife, so she spends a lot of time outdoors. But I have seen her in blue dresses for church, and she always looks happy wearing those. Blue is a good color for many women. Is she tall or short, thin or fuller figured?" Kyle's discomfort increased visibly. I am not sure it is proper for me to comment on a lady's figure. Mr. Thompson, if I am going to make a dress that fits, I need some idea of her measurements. You need not be specific. Just tell me if she is similar in build to me, for instance, or quite different." He studied her for a moment, his gaze professional but thorough enough that Delilah felt warmth creep up her neck. "Taller than you, I think, and broader in the shoulders. She is strong from ranch work." "Excellent. That is helpful. Does Mr. Hastings have a budget in mind?" "He told me to spend whatever was necessary to make something special. Money is not an issue." Delilah's mind began racing with possibilities. What if I sketched a few designs and you could take them back to show Mr. Hastings? Then once he chooses one he thinks his wife would like, I could arrange to come out to the ranch to take proper measurements. I could say I am doing it for all the ranch women, so Mrs. Hastings would not suspect it is a special order just for her. Kyle's face broke into a genuine smile, and Delilah felt something shift in her chest. He was handsome when he was serious, but when he smiled, he was absolutely devastating. "That is a perfect solution. You have a clever mind, Miss Kennedy." "Thank you." "Being clever is more useful than being ornamental in my experience." "I imagine you are both," he said, then immediately looked like he regretted the words. "I apologize. That was forward of me. It was a compliment and I will accept it as such. No apology necessary." Delilah pulled out her sketching paper and pencils. "Give me a moment to draw up some ideas. Would you like to sit down? There is a chair by the door." "I will stand, thank you. I have been in the saddle most of the morning and it feels good to be on my feet." As Delilah began sketching, she was acutely aware of Kyle watching her work. She tried to focus on the designs taking shape under her pencil, but her attention kept drifting to the man standing a few feet away. She wanted to know more about him, wanted to understand what had made him so determined to avoid marriage that he had bet money on remaining single. "You are new in town," Kyle said after a few minutes of silence. It was not a question. "I arrived from Kansas City about 3 weeks ago." "How did you know?" "Wichita is small enough that most people know each other, at least by sight. I would have remembered seeing you before." Delilah glanced up from her sketching, meeting his eyes. There was something in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. "Well, I am here now. I came to help my aunt with her business and to starting fresh. That is a good reason to come west." He hesitated, then asked, "Running from something, running towards something," she corrected. "My own life, my own choices." Understanding flickered in his expression. "I can respect that. Independence is worth fighting for." Is that why you work as a horse wrangler? The independence part of it. I also happen to be good with horses, and the prairie has a way of clearing your head, making you feel like you can breathe. You cannot get that feeling cooped up in a city. Delilah finished the first sketch and started on a second design. I think I know what you mean. Even in the short time I have been here, I have felt something different, like I can finally be myself without everyone watching and judging. That is exactly it, Kyle said, sounding surprised. Most people do not understand that feeling. Maybe most people have not had enough people trying to control their lives. The words hung in the air between them, laden with shared understanding. Delilah found herself wanting to tell this stranger everything about her father's plans for her future, about the marriage she had escaped, about all the ways she had felt trapped in Kansas City. But she bit her tongue. She barely knew this man, and besides, he had made his views on marriage quite clear to the entire town. The last thing she wanted was for him to think she was interested in changing his mind. She finished 3 sketches, each showing a different style of dress that would be flattering and practical for a rancher's wife. Kyle studied them carefully, his expression thoughtful. "These are remarkable," he said finally. "You have real talent, Miss Kennedy. Mr. Hastings is going to be impressed. Thank you. Just have him choose which design he prefers, and I will come out to the ranch next week to take measurements. What day would work best? Wednesday afternoons are usually quiet. Would that suit you? Wednesday is perfect. I will plan to arrive around 2 o'clock if that is acceptable." "That will be fine. I will make sure Mr. Hastings is prepared, and we will gather the ranch women so it does not look suspicious." Kyle carefully rolled up the sketches and tucked them inside his jacket. "I appreciate your help with this, Miss Kennedy, and your discretion." "It is my pleasure, Mr. Thompson. I hope Mrs. Hastings loves her birthday surprise." As Kyle moved toward the door, Delilah found herself not wanting him to leave just yet. Before she could think better of it, she heard herself saying, "Mr. Thompson, I was wondering something." He turned back, his hand on the door handle. "Yes. That horse you were gentling on Main Street last week. The big black one, did he settle down for you?" Kyle's face lit up with pride. "He did. Took a few more days of patient work, but he is coming along nicely now. How did you see that?" "I was arranging the window display. I have never seen anything like it, the way you worked with him. Most men would have just broken him with force. Breaking a horse's spirit is easy. Earning his trust takes time, but the end result is an animal who will work with you instead of just submitting to you. That makes all the difference." "That is a wise philosophy. I imagine it applies to more than just horses." "It does," Kyle agreed. His eyes met hers and something passed between them, a connection neither had expected. "Well, I should get back to the ranch. Thank you again for your help, Miss Kennedy." "You are welcome, Mr. Thompson. I will see you Wednesday." After he left, Delilah stood in the empty shop, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with fear or anxiety. She barely knew Kyle Thompson, had spent less than an hour in his presence, but something about him called to her in a way she had never experienced before. It was not just his looks, though he was certainly handsome. It was the way he spoke about independence and freedom, the gentleness he showed with the frightened horse, the respect in his eyes when he looked at her. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. This was foolish. He had made a bet that he would never marry. He was not interested in romance or relationships. And she had just escaped one unwanted marriage. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for a man who had sworn off the institution entirely. But as the days passed and Wednesday approached, Delilah found Kyle drifting into her thoughts more and more often. She told herself it was just because she was curious about the ranch, excited to take on such an important commission. She almost believed it. Wednesday arrived bright and clear, and Delilah prepared carefully for her visit to the Big Sky Ranch. She wore her most professional dress, dark green with minimal fuss, and packed her measuring supplies and notebooks into a sturdy bag. Aunt Martha had arranged for her to borrow Mrs. Henderson's buggy for the trip, and by 1:30, Delilah was on her way out of town. The ranch was about 6 miles outside Wichita, and the drive gave Delilah time to admire the Kansas landscape. August had turned the prairie grasses golden, and they rippled in the breeze like waves on a great ocean. The sky stretched overhead in endless blue, punctuated by fluffy white clouds that cast moving shadows across the land. She understood what Kyle had meant about feeling like you could breathe out here. The Big Sky Ranch was well named. The property sprawled across hundreds of acres, with herds of cattle dotting the distant fields and a collection of buildings clustered together near the main entrance. The ranch house was a large, 2-story structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Behind it stood a massive barn, several smaller outbuildings, and a series of corrals where horses moved restlessly. Kyle was waiting near the house when Delilah pulled up in the buggy. He hurried over to help her down, his hand warm and steady on her arm. "Miss Kennedy, welcome to the Big Sky Ranch. How was your drive?" "Pleasant, thank you. Your land is beautiful." "It is not my land, but I am fortunate to work here. Mr. Hastings is a fair man, and he treats his workers well." Kyle grabbed her bag from the buggy. "Everyone is gathered in the main house. Mr. Hastings chose the second design you sketched, and I think his wife is going to love it." "I hope so. Is Mrs. Hastings suspicious?" "Not at all. She thinks you are here to drum up business from all the women. Several of the ranch wives are genuinely interested in ordering dresses, so it worked out perfectly." Inside, the ranch house was comfortable and lived in, with sturdy furniture and colorful rugs scattered across polished wood floors. Mr. Hastings, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with kind eyes and a booming voice, greeted Delilah enthusiastically. "Miss Kennedy, Kyle has told me wonderful things about your work. My wife is in the parlor with the other ladies. She has no idea you are really here for her." He winked conspiratorially. Mrs. Hastings was a handsome woman in her late 40s, with sun-weathered skin and strong hands that spoke of hard work. She welcomed Delilah warmly, as did the 5 other ranch women gathered in the parlor. Delilah spent the next 2 hours taking measurements, discussing fabric preferences, and showing sketches of different dress styles. The women were delightful, full of stories and laughter, and Delilah found herself genuinely enjoying their company. When she took Mrs. Hastings' measurements, she made sure to add several detailed notes that she would not need for the other orders. Mrs. Hastings chatted happily throughout, completely unaware that she was being fitted for her own birthday surprise. By the time Delilah finished with all the women, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mr. Hastings insisted she stay for dinner before making the drive back to town, and Delilah accepted gratefully. Dinner at the Big Sky Ranch was a lively affair, with all the ranch hands gathering in the large dining room to share a meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. Delilah found herself seated between Kyle and one of the other cowboys, a friendly man named Jack who regaled her with exaggerated stories about ranch life. Kyle was quieter during dinner, but Delilah noticed him watching her several times, his expression thoughtful. When the meal ended and she prepared to leave, he appeared at her side. "It will be dark before you get back to town," he said. "Would you allow me to ride alongside your buggy, just to make sure you get home safely?" "That is not necessary, Mr. Thompson. I managed the trip here on my own." "I know you are capable, but the prairie at night can be unpredictable. Animals crossing the road, that sort of thing. I would feel better knowing you made it back safely." There was genuine concern in his eyes, and Delilah found herself agreeing. "All right, thank you." As they set out, Kyle on horseback beside her buggy, Delilah said, "You do not have to do this, you know. I really would have been fine." "I am sure you would have been, but I wanted to." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, the only sounds the clip-clop of hooves and the creaking of the buggy wheels. Finally, he said, "Because I enjoy your company. That does not happen to me often." Delilah felt warmth spread through her chest. "I enjoy your company too." "That surprises me." "Why would it surprise you?" "Most women in town think I am stubborn and difficult because I am not interested in courting." "I do not think you are difficult. I think you know what you want from your life and you are honest about it. That is admirable." Kyle guided his horse closer to the buggy. "You are different from other women I have met, Miss Kennedy. You do not seem bothered by my views on marriage." "Why would I be bothered? I just escaped an arranged marriage myself. I understand not wanting to be trapped in something you did not choose." "An arranged marriage?" Kyle's voice sharpened with concern. "Is that why you came to Wichita?" "Yes. My father had decided I would marry his business associate, a man twice my age whom I did not love. Everyone expected me to go along with it because that is what proper young ladies do. But I could not do it, so I ran." "Good for you," Kyle said fiercely. "No one should be forced into marriage against their will." "That is why I understand your position. Marriage should be a choice entered into freely by both parties. If you have chosen not to marry, that is your right." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Delilah found herself stealing glances at Kyle in the fading light. He sat his horse with easy grace, as much a part of the animal as the saddle and bridle. There was something deeply attractive about a man who was so comfortable in his own skin, so certain of his place in the world. "Can I ask you something personal?" Kyle said as they neared the outskirts of Wichita. "You can ask. I will decide if I want to answer." He smiled at that. "Fair enough." "Do you ever want to get married? On your own terms, I mean, to someone you chose?" Delilah considered the question carefully. "I do not know. A few weeks ago I would have said no, that I never wanted anything to do with marriage after what my parents tried to force on me. But now, I think maybe I was just rejecting the wrong kind of marriage. If I found the right person, someone who respected my independence and wanted to build a partnership rather than own me, then maybe I could see myself choosing that. That sounds like a rare thing to find." "It is. Which is why I am in no hurry. I am quite content building my life with my aunt, making beautiful dresses and being my own person." "That sounds like a good life," Kyle said, and he sounded almost wistful. They reached the dress shop just as full darkness fell. Kyle dismounted and helped Delilah down from the buggy, his hands steady on her waist. For a moment, they stood close together in the shadows, and Delilah was acutely aware of the warmth radiating from his body, the smell of leather and horses and prairie air that clung to him. "Thank you for escorting me home," she said softly. "Thank you for helping with Mrs. Hastings' surprise, and for the conversation. I have not talked to anyone like that in a long time." "Neither have I." Kyle seemed reluctant to step away. "Miss Kennedy, would it be all right if I called on you again? Just as a friend. I promise I have no intentions beyond enjoying your company." Delilah knew she should say no. She could feel something growing between them, something that went beyond simple friendship. If she let this continue, one or both of them was going to end up hurt. Kyle had made a bet that he would never marry, and she was still recovering from her escape from an unwanted engagement. This was a terrible idea. "I would like that," she heard herself say. Kyle's smile was brighter than the stars beginning to appear overhead. Good, I will come by on Saturday if that suits you. Saturday is fine. Good night, Mr. Thompson. Good night, Miss Kennedy. Delilah watched him ride away into the darkness, then stood for a long moment before going inside. Aunt Martha was waiting in the upstairs sitting room, darning socks by lamplight. "How was your trip to the ranch?" Martha asked, looking up with interest. "Very productive." "I got measurements from 7 women, including Mrs. Hastings. We will be busy for the next few weeks completing all these orders." And what? And how was Kyle Thompson? Delilah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He was perfectly polite and helpful. Why do you ask?" "Because that young man rode into town alongside your buggy and stood talking with you in the street for several minutes. Do not think I did not notice. We were just talking. He is coming by on Saturday to visit, as a friend." Martha set down her darning and fixed Delilah with a knowing look. "Be careful, dear heart. I know you think you can keep things purely friendly, but I saw how he looked at you before he rode away. That man may think he does not want to fall in love, but I do not think his heart got the message. You are imagining things. I am a woman who has lived long enough to recognize the signs. Just promise me you will guard your heart. Kyle Thompson is a good man, but he is also stubborn as a mule about marriage. If you develop feelings for him and he does not change his views, you are going to end up hurt." "I promise to be careful," Delilah said, though she was not sure she could keep that promise. Something had already taken root in her heart, something that felt dangerous and wonderful all at once. The next few days dragged by with agonizing slowness. Delilah threw herself into work, cutting fabric and stitching seams for the ranch orders. But her mind kept drifting to Kyle, replaying their conversations, remembering the warmth in his eyes and the gentleness of his touch when he helped her from the buggy. Saturday finally arrived, and Delilah spent far too long deciding what to wear. She finally settled on a blue dress that brought out her eyes, then felt foolish for caring so much. They were just friends. This was not a courtship. Kyle arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, freshly shaved and wearing clothes that were clearly his best. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that he presented to Delilah with an almost shy smile. "I picked these on the way into town. I thought you might like them. They are beautiful." "Thank you." Delilah accepted the flowers, touched by the gesture even as a small voice in her head warned her that this was not the behavior of someone who just wanted to be friends. "I was thinking we could take a walk if you are free. There is a nice path along the river that is not too far from town." "That sounds lovely. Let me just tell my aunt where I am going." Martha appeared in the doorway behind Delilah, her expression neutral but her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Hello, Mr. Thompson. I hear you are taking my niece for a walk." "Yes, madam, just along the river path. I will have her back before supper." "See that you do. Delilah, take your parasol. The sun is strong today." As they walked through town toward the river, Delilah was aware of people watching them. She saw Mrs. Henderson and several other women whispering behind their hands, their expressions ranging from curious to envious. Kyle seemed oblivious to the attention, focused entirely on their conversation. "How has your week been?" he asked. "Busy. All those ranch orders have kept my aunt and me working from dawn until well past dark. But I love it. There is something satisfying about creating something beautiful with your own hands. I feel the same way about working with horses. When you take an animal that is terrified and wild and help him learn to trust, there is no better feeling." They reached the river path, a pleasant trail that wound along the Arkansas River through stands of cottonwood trees. The shade was welcome after the bright sunlight of Main Street, and the sound of flowing water created a peaceful backdrop. "Tell me about your family," Delilah said as they walked. "I know you said your parents had a difficult marriage, but you do not have to talk about it if you would rather not." Kyle was silent for a moment, his jaw tight. Then he seemed to relax. "It is all right. It was a long time ago. My father died when I was 8 and my mother remarried within a year. She chose poorly, married a man who drank too much and had a violent temper. He died 5 years later and she married again, this time to a man who was just cold and cruel in different ways. I watched her spirit break a little more every year until she died when I was 17. "I am so sorry," Delilah said softly. "That must have been awful to witness. It taught me that marriage is often a trap, especially for women. My mother had no choices, no way to support herself, so she kept marrying men who would take care of her financially but made her miserable in every other way. I swore I would never put myself or anyone else in that position." "But it does not have to be that way," Delilah protested. "My Aunt Martha divorced her husband and has built a successful life on her own, and I have seen couples who genuinely love and support each other. My younger brother's teacher and her husband are like that. They are partners in every sense of the word. I know such relationships exist. They are just so rare that betting on finding one seems foolish. But you have bet that you will never find one. Is not that just as foolish in its own way?" Kyle stopped walking and turned to face her. "Why does this matter to you, Miss Kennedy? We barely know each other." Delilah met his gaze steadily, her heart pounding. "It matters because I think you are using your past as an excuse to avoid taking a risk. You are so afraid of ending up like your mother that you have decided to avoid love entirely. But in doing so, you are also avoiding the possibility of real happiness." "And what about you?" Kyle challenged. "You ran away from marriage. Are you not also avoiding something?" "I am avoiding being forced into a loveless match. That is not the same as avoiding love itself." "Is it not? You said you were not sure if you would ever want to marry, even on your own terms." "I said I did not know. That is different from declaring I never will. I am leaving the possibility open." They stood on the path, neither willing to back down, and Delilah realized they were having their first real argument, but instead of feeling angry, she felt energized. This was real, honest conversation, not the polite small talk that had characterized every interaction she had with men in Kansas City. "I think we should keep walking," Kyle said finally, "before we say things we might regret." They continued along the path in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Delilah felt like they had crossed some kind of threshold, moved from polite acquaintances to something deeper and more complex. After a while, Kyle said, "I did not mean to snap at you. You touched a nerve." "I know. I am sorry if I pushed too hard. Your choices are your own, and I have no right to question them." "You have every right to question them. You are one of the few people who seems to actually care about why I feel the way I do, rather than just calling me stubborn or foolish." "I do not think you are foolish. Scared maybe, but not foolish. Scared." Kyle tested the word like it was foreign to him. "I suppose that is accurate, but fear has kept me safe this long." "Safety is not the same as happiness." "No, it is not." He looked at her with an expression that made Delilah's breath catch. "You confuse me, Miss Kennedy. You make me question things I thought I had settled long ago." "Is that a bad thing?" "I do not know yet." They walked for another hour, the conversation turning to lighter topics. Kyle told her stories about life on the ranch, about the various characters among the cowboys and the horses that had taught him the most important lessons. Delilah shared memories of her childhood in Kansas City, the few good moments she could find among the pressure and expectations. By the time they returned to town, the sun was low in the sky, painting everything golden. Kyle walked Delilah to the door of the dress shop, and they stood together in the fading light. "Thank you for the walk," Delilah said. "Despite our argument, I enjoyed myself." "So did I." Especially the argument, strange as that sounds. You are the first person in years who has challenged me like that. You needed challenging. Kyle laughed, a genuine sound of delight. Apparently so. May I see you again? I know I am probably confusing you as much as you are confusing me, but I do not want to stop spending time with you. Yes, you may see me again. But Kyle, I need you to be honest with me about your intentions. I am not interested in games or manipulation. If you are just looking for a friend, that is fine. But if there is any part of you that is interested in something more, you need to tell me, because I need to decide if I can handle that given your views on marriage. Her directness seemed to catch him off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said carefully, I do not know what I want. That is the most honest answer I can give you. I know I enjoy your company more than I have enjoyed anyone's company in years. I know I think about you constantly when we are apart. But I do not know if I can give you what you might want from me. What do you think I want from you? A future. A real relationship. The possibility of marriage someday. Delilah considered this. I do not know what I want either, if that helps. I am still figuring out who I am outside of my family's expectations. But I know I like you, Kyle Thompson, and I would like to keep getting to know you. Whatever that leads to, we can figure out together. Relief washed over his face. That sounds reasonable. No promises either way, just seeing where this goes. Exactly. They stood smiling at each other like fools until Aunt Martha opened the door and said dryly, I assume you two would like some supper. Because I made extra, and you might as well come in and eat, Mr. Thompson, since you have been standing on my doorstep long enough to grow roots. Kyle accepted the invitation, and soon they were sitting around Martha's small kitchen table, eating chicken and dumplings while Martha regaled them with stories of her most difficult customers. Kyle fit in easily, laughing at the right moments and offering his own stories of difficult horses as counterpoint to Martha's difficult clients. Watching him, Delilah felt something warm and precious growing in her chest. This felt right in a way nothing in her life had felt right before. Kyle was complicated and stubborn and scared, but he was also kind and honest and brave in his own way. She wanted to know all of him, wanted to unravel the layers of protection he had built around his heart, but she also knew that pushing too hard would drive him away. She would have to be patient, let him come to his own conclusions in his own time. The question was whether she could guard her own heart while she waited, or whether she was already too far gone to protect herself. Over the next few weeks, Kyle and Delilah fell into a pattern. He would visit several times a week, and they would walk or talk, or sometimes just sit together on the porch of the dress shop, watching the town go by. Kyle was attentive and thoughtful, bringing her small gifts like interesting rocks he found on the prairie or a particularly beautiful feather from a hawk. But he was also careful not to cross certain lines. He never held her hand, never touched her more than was strictly necessary. When other men made clear their romantic intentions, Kyle maintained a friendly distance that sometimes frustrated Delilah even though she understood it. The town, naturally, was full of gossip about them. Mrs. Henderson came into the shop one day and said with barely concealed glee, I see you and Mr. Thompson have become quite friendly. Do you think he will finally break down and marry? Mr. Thompson and I are friends, nothing more, Delilah said firmly, even though the words felt like lies. That is what they all say, but I have seen the way he looks at you, girl. That man is smitten whether he wants to admit it or not. After Mrs. Henderson left, Martha said, She is not wrong, you know. Kyle is falling for you. Anyone with eyes can see it. He does not want to fall for me. He is fighting it every step of the way, which makes it all the more obvious that he is losing the battle. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? I have told him I like him. I have made clear I am interested in whatever he can offer. The rest is up to him. But as September arrived and the Kansas heat began to moderate, Delilah started to wonder if Kyle would ever overcome his fear enough to risk his heart. They had been spending time together for over a month, and while their connection deepened with each conversation, he seemed no closer to admitting his feelings than he had been at the beginning. Then came the day everything changed. Delilah was working on Mrs. Hastings' birthday dress, carefully stitching delicate lace onto the bodice, when she heard shouting from the street. She rushed to the window and saw a crowd gathering. Her heart seized with fear when she recognized Kyle's horse tied outside the general store, and people were running in that direction. She abandoned her sewing and ran outside, pushing through the crowd. Inside the general store, she found Kyle kneeling beside an older man who had collapsed. The man's face was gray and he was clutching his chest. "Someone get the doctor," Kyle shouted, then looked up and saw Delilah. "Miss Kennedy, I need your help. Mr. Walsh cannot breathe properly." "Do you know anything about medicine?" Delilah did not, but she knew panic would not help. She knelt beside Kyle and took the old man's hand. "Mr. Walsh, we are getting the doctor. Try to stay calm. Breathe slowly." The doctor arrived within minutes and took over, but Kyle and Delilah stayed until Mr. Walsh was stabilized and carried to the doctor's office. Afterward, they stood outside the general store, both shaken by what they had witnessed. "That was terrifying," Delilah said, her voice trembling. "For a moment I thought he was going to die right there." "So did I." Kyle looked at her, and something in his expression had shifted. Without warning, he pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly against his chest. "I am glad you were here. I do not know why, but having you beside me made it easier to stay calm." Delilah wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heart beating fast against her cheek. This was the first time he had held her like this, and it felt simultaneously wonderful and terrifying. She could feel the walls he had built around himself starting to crumble. When they finally pulled apart, Kyle kept his hands on her shoulders, looking at her with raw emotion in his eyes. "Delilah, I need to tell you something." She waited, barely breathing. "I am scared," he said. "I am more scared than I have ever been in my life, but I cannot keep pretending that we are just friends. You have gotten under my skin, into my head, and I think about you every moment we are apart. I dream about you at night. I find myself looking for excuses to come into town just to see your face." "Kyle, wait, let me finish. I know I made that stupid bet with my friends. I know I said I would never marry. But I am starting to realize that I said those things because I had never met anyone who made me want to take the risk. Until you." Delilah's heart was beating so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me, but I do not want to fight it anymore. I do not know if I can be the man you deserve. I do not know if I will ever be able to fully let go of my fears, but I want to try, if you will have me." Tears sprang to Delilah's eyes. "Of course I will have you. I have been waiting for you to realize what I already knew." "What did you already know?" "That we are meant to be together. That whatever scared, broken parts we bring to this relationship, we can heal each other. That love is worth the risk." Kyle cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I do not deserve you." "Yes, you do, and I do not deserve you, but maybe together we can deserve each other." He kissed her then, right there on Main Street with half the town watching. It was gentle and fierce all at once, a kiss that held all the fear and hope and desperate longing they had both been feeling. When they finally broke apart, someone in the crowd started clapping, and soon everyone was cheering and whistling. Kyle laughed, his forehead resting against Delilah's. "Well, I suppose the whole town knows now. I think they already knew we were not exactly subtle. No, I suppose we were not. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Come on, I need to go tell 5 men that they just won a bet. Delilah pulled him to a stop. Kyle, wait. You do not have to do anything hasty. We can take our time, figure things out slowly. I do not want to take my time. I have wasted enough time being scared. Besides, I did not say I was proposing marriage today. Just admitting that I am going to lose that bet eventually. Probably soon. How soon? That depends on you. How long do you need to be courted properly before you will consider marrying me? Delilah laughed through her tears. I think I need at least a few months to plan a proper wedding. My aunt would kill me if we eloped. A few months I can do. But fair warning, Miss Kennedy, I am going to spend every day of those months making sure you have no doubts about spending the rest of your life with a stubborn, scared cowboy who is completely in love with you. I have no doubts already, but I will happily accept your efforts anyway. They walked hand in hand to the Red River Saloon, where Kyle knew his friends would be gathered. Sure enough, Marcus, Billy, and 3 other ranch hands were at their usual table, playing cards and drinking beer. Kyle, Marcus called out, come join us. We were just talking about you. Were you now? Kyle pulled up a chair, keeping Delilah's hand firmly in his. That is convenient because I need to talk to you as well. Billy looked at their joined hands and his eyes went wide. Kyle, is that Delilah Kennedy? Are you too? Yes, we are courting, officially. And I am here to tell you that you won the bet. The table erupted in chaos. Marcus jumped to his feet, shouting in triumph. Billy was laughing so hard he nearly fell off his chair. The other men were slapping the table and calling for drinks all around. I knew it, Marcus crowed. I knew you would fall eventually, and it only took 5 years and the perfect woman to make it happen. Actually, it only took about 6 weeks, Kyle corrected. From the moment she walked into my life, I did not stand a chance. Delilah felt herself blushing as all the men turned to look at her with frank appreciation. It is nice to meet all of you properly. I have heard many stories. All good, I hope, Billy said with a grin. Kyle is our friend, and we are happy to see him finally happy. You must be something special to change his mind about marriage. She is, Kyle said simply. She is everything. So when is the wedding? One of the other men asked. We have not set a date yet, but it will be soon. A few months, probably. Well then, drinks are on us tonight, Marcus declared. To celebrate the end of Kyle Thompson's bachelorhood and the beginning of what I am sure will be a wonderful marriage. They toasted with beer and laughter, and Delilah found herself warming to Kyle's friends immediately. They were rough around the edges, but their affection for Kyle was genuine, and they welcomed her into their circle without reservation. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Delilah and Kyle slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The sun had set, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Are you sure about this? Kyle asked, his voice soft with vulnerability. I am still scared, Delilah. I am scared I will mess this up, that I will hurt you somehow, that I am not capable of being a good husband. I am scared too, Delilah admitted. I am scared that I will disappoint you, that I will not be enough, that my past will catch up with us somehow. But I would rather face those fears with you than be safe and alone. When did you get so wise? I think I have always been this wise. You just had to stop being stubborn long enough to notice. Kyle laughed and pulled her close, kissing her temple. I love you, Delilah Kennedy. I do not say those words lightly. I have never said them to anyone before. I love you too, Kyle Thompson. And I promise I will spend the rest of our lives proving that you made the right choice in taking this risk. I already know I did. They stood together under the stars, and Delilah felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was where she was meant to be, with this man who had fought so hard against loving her and had finally surrendered. They had both run from different things to find each other in Wichita, and now they would build a future together, one day at a time. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness and preparation. Kyle courted Delilah with a determination that was almost comical given his previous stance on romance. He brought her flowers every time he came to town. He took her on picnics by the river. He introduced her to all the horses he was training and taught her to ride properly. For her part, Delilah threw herself into creating her own wedding dress, the most elaborate and beautiful thing she had ever sewn. She used cream-colored silk that Martha ordered special from Kansas City, with delicate lace overlay and seed pearls stitched in intricate patterns across the bodice. Every stitch was a labor of love, and she poured all her hopes for their future into the creation. In October, Mrs. Hastings had her birthday, and the dress Delilah made was a tremendous success. Mr. Hastings pulled Kyle aside afterward and told him, "That woman you are marrying has real talent, and from what I have seen, she has a good heart too. You are a lucky man." "I know, sir. Believe me, I know." They set the wedding date for the first Sunday in November, giving Delilah time to finish her dress, and allowing the weather to cool enough that standing in a church would not be unbearable. Delilah's aunt handled all the other arrangements, working with the local minister and organizing the reception. The question of Delilah's family hung over the preparations like a cloud. She had written to her parents shortly after she and Kyle began courting, informing them of her intention to marry and inviting them to the wedding. Her mother's response was curt and disapproving, saying they would not condone her rebellious behavior by attending. Her younger brother, Thomas, sent a separate letter saying he would come anyway. "Parents be damned." "I am sorry your parents are being so stubborn," Kyle said when he learned they would not be attending. "I am not," Delilah replied. "I would rather they stay away than come and make everyone miserable with their disapproval. This day is about us and our future, not about proving anything to them. You are remarkable, do you know that? You keep telling me. I am starting to believe it." 2 weeks before the wedding, Kyle took Delilah out to the Big Sky Ranch to show her something. He led her past the main house and barn to a smaller cabin set back among a grove of cottonwood trees. "What is this?" Delilah asked. "This is where I have been living for the past 5 years. But Mr. Hastings has agreed to let us fix it up and expand it after we are married. It is not much right now, but I thought we could make it into a real home, together." Delilah walked through the small cabin, seeing past the bare walls and simple furnishings to the potential beneath. The main room had a stone fireplace and good bones. The bedroom was tiny but cozy. There was space behind the cabin to add on a kitchen and maybe another bedroom or two eventually. "It is perfect," she said, turning to Kyle with shining eyes. "I can see it already. Curtains on the windows, rugs on the floor, books on shelves by the fireplace, a kitchen where I can cook for you, a garden out front where I can grow flowers and vegetables. You can see all that. I can see our whole life here, can you?" Kyle looked around the cabin as if seeing it with new eyes. "Yes, I can see it now. You, me, and maybe someday children running around getting into trouble." "Children?" Delilah raised an eyebrow. "You have thought that far ahead. I have thought about everything with you. Every possible future we might have together. And I want all of it, Delilah. Every messy, complicated, beautiful bit of it." She kissed him then, standing in the dusty cabin that would become their home. It was not a gentle kiss. It held all the passion and promise of their future together, all the love that had grown between them despite Kyle's best efforts to prevent it. When they finally broke apart, Kyle said breathlessly, "We should probably get married soon, like very soon." Delilah laughed. 2 weeks. You can wait 2 weeks, can I though? Yes, you can, because I am not starting our marriage by rushing things. I want to do this properly with all our friends and family there to witness it. Fine, but those are going to be the longest 2 weeks of my life. They were not, as it turned out. Those 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of final preparations, last-minute fittings, and increasingly impatient anticipation. Kyle's friends threw him a party at the saloon that got rowdy enough that Marcus had to escort him home before he did something stupid. Martha organized a small gathering for Delilah with the women from the ranch and several of her regular customers, where they shared advice about marriage that ranged from practical to scandalous. Finally, the first Sunday in November arrived clear and cool, perfect weather for a wedding. Delilah woke early in the upstairs apartment, her stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. Martha came in with coffee and toast, insisting she eat something before the ceremony. "You look terrified," Martha observed. "I am, but in a good way. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." "I was terrified when I got married too, though my reasons were different. But you, my dear girl, have nothing to be afraid of. Kyle loves you completely. Anyone who sees you together knows that." "I know. I just keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong." "Nothing is going to go wrong. And even if something does, you will handle it together. That is what marriage is, Delilah, facing whatever comes and knowing you are not alone." By noon, Delilah was dressed in her wedding gown, and even she had to admit she looked beautiful. The cream silk shimmered in the afternoon light, and the lace overlay made her look like something out of a fairy tale. Martha had helped her pin her dark hair up in an elaborate style, with small white flowers woven throughout. "Your mother would be proud if she could see past her own stubbornness," Martha said, her eyes misty with tears. "You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen." Thomas arrived just before they needed to leave for the church, and Delilah barely recognized her younger brother. At 19, he had grown tall and broad-shouldered, no longer the gangly boy she remembered. He swept her into a careful hug, mindful of her dress. "You look incredible," he said. "And I am so happy for you, Del. Mother and father do not know what they are missing. Thank you for coming anyway. It means everything to me. Someone from the family needed to have sense. Besides, I have heard stories about this Kyle Thompson. I wanted to meet the man who made my sister fall in love." The church was a simple white building at the edge of town, with a tall steeple that could be seen for miles across the prairie. When Delilah arrived, she could hear music drifting from inside and saw that the small building was packed with people. It seemed like everyone in Wichita had turned out for the wedding of the man who swore he would never marry. Martha squeezed her hand before heading inside. "This is it, my dear. Are you ready?" "I have never been more ready for anything in my life." Thomas offered his arm. "Then let us go make you a married woman." The doors opened, and Delilah walked down the aisle on her brother's arm to the sound of a violin playing a simple but sweet melody. She barely noticed the crowd or the decorations, or anything except Kyle standing at the front of the church, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. He wore a new suit, probably the first suit he had ever owned, and his dark hair was neatly combed. But it was the expression on his face that took her breath away. He was crying, tears streaming openly down his cheeks, with a smile so full of joy and love that Delilah felt her own tears starting. When Thomas handed her over to Kyle, her brother whispered, "Take care of my sister." "With my life," Kyle promised. The ceremony was simple and traditional, with the minister speaking about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. But Delilah barely heard the words. She was lost in Kyle's eyes, seeing in them the reflection of everything she felt, all the hope and promise of their future together. When it came time for the vows, Kyle's voice was strong and steady. I, Kyle Thompson, take you, Delilah Kennedy, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to face my fears with you beside me, to build a home with you, and to never take for granted the gift of your love. You have changed everything I thought I knew about the world, and I am grateful for it every single day. Delilah could barely speak through her tears, but she managed to say her own vows. I, Delilah Kennedy, take you, Kyle Thompson, to be my husband. I promise to love you, support you, and stand beside you through whatever life brings. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your home. You have given me the freedom to be myself while also giving me the security of your love, and I will treasure that gift forever. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Kyle kissed her, the church erupted in applause and cheering. It was not the dignified, restrained ceremony Delilah would have had if she married Gerald Whitmore in Kansas City. It was warm and joyful and perfectly them. The reception was held at the Big Sky Ranch, where Mr. and Mrs. Hastings had generously offered the use of their large barn. Tables had been set up with food and drink, and someone had brought a fiddle and guitar to provide music for dancing. It was a true Western celebration, full of laughter and storytelling and genuine happiness. Kyle's 5 friends from the saloon presented them with a gift, pooling the money from their bet to buy a beautiful carved headboard for their bed. "We are happy to lose this bet," Marcus said. "You two are proof that true love exists, even for stubborn fools like Kyle." "I will take that as the compliment it was meant to be," Kyle replied, shaking hands with each man. Throughout the evening, Delilah and Kyle danced and ate and accepted congratulations from what felt like everyone in Kansas. But the best moments were the quiet ones, when they would catch each other's eye across the crowded barn and share a private smile that said more than words ever could. As the sun set and the party showed no signs of slowing down, Kyle pulled Delilah aside. "Want to get out of here? Go home to our cabin?" "Absolutely. But how do we leave without everyone noticing? We are the bride and groom. We can leave whenever we want." They said their goodbyes amid much teasing and well-wishing, then climbed into Kyle's wagon for the short ride to their cabin. Someone had already been there to prepare it for them. Candles were lit throughout the small space, casting a warm glow. The bed had been made with fresh linens, and there were wildflowers in a vase on the table. "Who did all this?" Delilah asked, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Mrs. Hastings, probably. She has been fussing over us like a mother hen for weeks." Delilah turned to face her husband, still marveling at the fact that she could call him that now. "We are married, Kyle Thompson. We are Mrs. Delilah Thompson." He pulled her close, his hands gentle on her waist. "Are you happy, deliriously happy?" "You, terrified," he admitted. "But also happier than I have ever been." "Is that normal?" "I think so. I am scared too. This is all new territory for both of us." "Then we will figure it out together. No rushing, no expectations. Just you and me learning how to be married." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Delilah felt all her nervousness melt away. This was Kyle, the man who had fought against loving her and had finally surrendered completely. The man who brought her wildflowers and taught her about horses. The man who had sworn he would never marry and then proposed after only knowing her for a few months. This was the man she loved, and they had the rest of their lives to figure out everything else. The first few months of marriage were an adjustment for both of them. Kyle was used to living alone, answering to no one and coming and going as he pleased. Delilah was used to the structure and routine of city life and living with her aunt. Combining their lives in the small cabin required patience and compromise, and occasionally some heated discussions about things like how to organize the kitchen, or whether boots should be left by the door, or taken off on the porch. But they also discovered the profound joy of sharing their lives. Kyle loved coming home from a long day of work to find Delilah cooking dinner or sewing by lamplight. Delilah loved waking up beside Kyle every morning, loved learning all his little habits and preferences. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for their future. Kyle continued working as a horse wrangler at the Big Sky Ranch, and Delilah kept helping her aunt with the dress shop, riding into town 3 days a week to work. They found a rhythm that suited both of them, balancing independence with togetherness. As winter settled over Kansas, bringing cold winds and occasional snow, they spent long evenings by the fireplace, Kyle reading while Delilah sewed. It was domestic and ordinary and absolutely perfect. "Do you ever miss your old life?" Delilah asked one evening in December as snow fell softly outside their window. Kyle looked up from his book, considering the question. "My old life before you? No, I thought I was happy, but I was really just avoiding being unhappy. There is a difference." "What about you? Do you miss Kansas City?" "Not even a little bit, though I do think about my brother sometimes. I hope he is all right. We could invite him to visit in the spring if you would like." "Really, of course. He is your family and he stood by you when your parents would not." "I would like to get to know him better." Delilah set aside her sewing and moved to sit on Kyle's lap, curling into his warmth. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour. I was beginning to worry." She laughed and kissed him. "I love you, Kyle Thompson. Thank you for taking a chance on us." "Best risk I ever took," he murmured against her lips. As winter gave way to spring, they began expanding the cabin, adding a proper kitchen and a second bedroom. Kyle did most of the work himself with help from some of the ranch hands on weekends. Delilah contributed by making curtains and cushions, slowly transforming the rustic cabin into a real home. In April, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be sure before saying anything to Kyle. When she finally told him one evening after dinner, he was so overcome with emotion that he could not speak for several minutes. "A baby," he finally managed. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes. In late October or early November, the doctor thinks." Kyle pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "I am going to be a father." "Oh God, Delilah, I do not know the first thing about being a father. And I do not know the first thing about being a mother. We will learn together, just like we have learned everything else." "What if I mess it up? What if I am a terrible father?" "You will not be. You are patient and kind and gentle with animals that are far more difficult than a baby will be. And more importantly, you love completely once you let yourself. Our child will be so lucky to have you as a father." Kyle kissed her then, and when he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. "I never thought I would have this. A wife, a home, a family. I thought I would spend my whole life alone, and I told myself I was happy that way. But this, Delilah, this is real happiness. And it is better than anything I could have imagined." The news spread through the community quickly, and soon everyone was congratulating them and offering advice. Mrs. Hastings gave Delilah a stack of baby clothes she had saved from when her own children were small. The women from the ranch organized a quilting bee to make a baby quilt. Kyle's friends teased him mercilessly about going from sworn bachelor to expectant father in less than a year. "You do not do anything halfway, do you?" Marcus said, clapping Kyle on the back. "When you decide to change your mind, you really commit." "Best decision I ever made," Kyle replied, and he meant it. Thomas visited in June, staying for a week and helping with work on the cabin expansion. He and Kyle got along well, bonding over hard work and evening conversations on the porch. Before Thomas left to return to Kansas City, he pulled Delilah aside. "I have never seen you this happy," he said. "You made the right choice running away and building this life. I hope someday I am brave enough to do the same. You will be. And when you are, you will always have a place here with us. Thank you, and Del. I am going to be an uncle. That is pretty incredible. You will be a wonderful uncle." As summer heat settled over Kansas and Delilah's belly grew round with their child, Kyle became increasingly protective and attentive. He would not let her lift anything heavy or work too long in the heat. He brought home special foods he thought she might crave. He talked to the baby every night before they went to sleep, his hand on her stomach, telling stories about the horses he worked with and the prairie they would explore together someday. "You are going to be such a good father," Delilah said one night as they lay in bed, her head on his chest. "I hope so. I am still terrified I will do something wrong. Every parent is terrified. That is how you know you care enough to do it right. When did you get so wise?" "I think I have always been this wise. You just had to stop being stubborn long enough to notice." Kyle laughed at that, recognizing his own words from months ago thrown back at him. Touché. In late October, on a cool autumn night with the stars brilliant overhead, Delilah went into labor. Kyle rode into town to fetch the doctor while Mrs. Hastings stayed with Delilah, coaching her through the contractions and keeping her calm. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the next day. Kyle paced outside the cabin, sick with worry, until finally he heard the sound he had been desperately waiting for, a baby's cry. Mrs. Hastings emerged, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Kyle, a healthy, beautiful boy, and Delilah is fine. Tired but fine." Kyle rushed inside to find Delilah propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but glowing with happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt the ranch women had made. Kyle approached slowly, almost afraid to get too close. "Come meet your son," Delilah said softly. Kyle sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He had a shock of dark hair and his mother's delicate features. His eyes were scrunched shut, and he was making small snuffling noises that Kyle found utterly adorable. "He is perfect," Kyle whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The baby's fingers closed around Kyle's finger, and Kyle felt something break open in his chest. "Hello, little one. I am your father, and I promise I am going to do everything I can to give you a better life than I had." "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They had discussed names for months but had not been able to agree on one. Now, looking at his son, Kyle knew exactly what felt right. "Matthew, I think he looks like a Matthew." "Matthew Thompson," Delilah tested the name. "I love it. Hello, Matthew, welcome to the world." The baby opened his eyes then, dark blue and unfocused, seeming to look right at Kyle. And in that moment, Kyle felt the last of his old fears and hesitations fall away completely. This was what mattered. This family he had built, this love he had found despite all his efforts to avoid it. He leaned over to kiss Delilah's forehead. "Thank you, for being stubborn enough to see past my defenses, for making me lose that bet, for giving me this life I never knew I wanted. Thank you for being brave enough to take the risk. I know it was not easy for you." "Best risk I ever took," Kyle said, echoing the words that had become his mantra. "I love you, Delilah. I love our son. I love this life we have built together. I love you too. Now, do you want to hold your son?" Kyle took Matthew carefully, cradling him against his chest with the wonder and fear of a new parent. The baby settled immediately, seeming to know he was safe in his father's arms. And Kyle thought about the bet he had made in the Red River Saloon over a year ago, when he had been so certain he would never marry. He had been a fool. But he was a happy fool now, and he would spend the rest of his life being grateful that Delilah Kennedy had walked into his life and changed everything he thought he knew about love and family and happiness. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. They added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Sarah 2 years after Matthew, and another son named Daniel 2 years after that. The cabin expanded again to accommodate their growing family, becoming a proper house with multiple bedrooms and a spacious kitchen where Delilah still made beautiful dresses on the sewing machine Kyle bought her as a present. Kyle continued working with horses, eventually becoming the head wrangler at the Big Sky Ranch when the previous head retired. He taught Matthew everything he knew about horses, and later Sarah and Daniel as well. All 3 children grew up riding before they could walk, as comfortable on horseback as on foot. Delilah balanced motherhood with her passion for dressmaking, creating beautiful clothes for women all over Kansas. Her work became sought after, and she could have easily made a fortune if she charged what her skills were worth. But she kept her prices reasonable, saying the joy of creation was reward enough. Kyle's friends never let him forget the bet, bringing it up at every opportunity with good-natured teasing. But Kyle did not mind. He was proud of losing that bet, proud of the family he had built, proud of the man Delilah had helped him become. Martha remained a constant presence in their lives, becoming the beloved aunt to all 3 children. She finally retired from the dress shop when she turned 60, selling it to one of her apprentices, but still visiting often to spoil her great-niece and great-nephews. Thomas visited as often as his work allowed, eventually moving to Wichita permanently when he was 25. He opened a general store in town and became a successful businessman in his own right. He never reconciled with his parents, but he built his own life on his own terms, inspired by Delilah's courage in doing the same. Delilah's parents never reached out, never met their grandchildren, and while Delilah sometimes felt sad about that, she had made peace with it. She had created her own family, chosen them rather than being bound by blood, and that made them even more precious. One evening, 20 years after that first meeting in the dress shop, Kyle and Delilah sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and orange. Matthew was away at university in Kansas City, studying to become a veterinarian. Sarah was in town working at her great-aunt's old dress shop, having inherited Delilah's talent with needle and thread. Daniel was in the barn tending to the horses, having inherited his father's gift for working with animals. "We did good, did not we?" Kyle said, taking Delilah's hand. "We did very good," she agreed. "Look at what we built. A family, a home, a life full of love and laughter. All because you were determined enough to make me lose a bet. All because you were brave enough to let me." Kyle pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, perfectly content. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful, and Kyle thought about all the years that had passed since he rode into Wichita as a young man determined never to marry. He had been so certain he knew what he wanted, so sure that independence and solitude were the only paths to happiness. But Delilah had shown him a different way. She had taught him that love was not a trap, but a freedom of its own, that sharing your life with someone you loved was not giving up who you were, but becoming more fully yourself. "What are you thinking about?" Delilah asked. "About that day I came into your shop asking for help with Mrs. Hastings' dress. If I had known that woman at the cutting table was going to completely upend my life, I might have turned around and walked right back out." "No, you would not have. You were already half in love with me from seeing me through the window that day you were gentling the horse." "Was not. I did not even know who you were. But you noticed me. You remembered me. That was the beginning." Kyle could not argue with that. "Fine, maybe I was intrigued, but I fought it admirably. You fought it terribly. You were obvious from the start. Was I really, completely? Everyone in town knew you were falling for me except you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars that had shone overhead on their wedding night, on the night each of their children was born, on 1,000 ordinary evenings that had made up their extraordinary life together. "Kyle," Delilah said softly. "Yes, my love. If you could go back and warn your younger self about what was coming about me, about marriage, about all of it, would you?" Kyle thought about it seriously, then shook his head. "No, because if I warned him, he might have tried harder to resist. And then he would have missed out on the best thing that ever happened to him. Every moment of fear, every struggle to let go of my old beliefs, every terrifying step into the unknown was worth it, because it led me here, to you, to our children, to this life I love so much it sometimes scares me. It still scares you, every day. I am scared something will happen to you or the children. I am scared I will wake up and discover this was all a dream. I am scared because I have so much to lose now, and that makes me vulnerable in ways I never was before. But you do not regret it. Not for one single second. The vulnerability is worth it. The fear is worth it. Because love is worth it, Delilah. You taught me that." She kissed him then, sweet and gentle and full of all the years they had shared together. When they pulled apart, she said, "Thank you for being stubborn enough to need convincing. It made winning you over so much more satisfying." Kyle laughed, the sound carrying across the prairie. "Always happy to be a challenge. Good, because I am not done challenging you yet. We have years left to argue about where to put the new fence and whether Daniel should be allowed to train that wild Mustang he has been eyeing. He is 14. He is absolutely not ready for a wild Mustang. See, years of arguing left in us yet." They sat together as night fell completely, the prairie dark except for their lighted windows and the stars overhead. Inside the house, they could hear Daniel moving around, probably reading one of the horse training books Kyle had bought him. In town, Sarah was likely finishing up at the shop, maybe dreaming about dress designs the way her mother used to. And far away in Kansas City, Matthew was studying hard, preparing to come home for Christmas in a few months. Their family was scattered but connected, bound by love and shared history, and the foundation Kyle and Delilah had built together. It was not the life Kyle had planned for himself all those years ago when he sat in the Red River Saloon, so certain he knew what he wanted. It was infinitely better. "Come on," Delilah said, standing and pulling Kyle to his feet. "Let us go inside. I'm getting cold, and besides, our son needs help with his arithmetic homework, and you are better at that than I am. You just want me to do the hard work while you supervise. That is what marriage is, darling. Dividing up the labor so we each do what we are best at." Kyle followed his wife inside, closing the door against the chill of the November night. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together, children's drawings on the walls, books stacked on every surface, quilts Delilah had made draped over the furniture. This was home. Not the building or the land, but the love that filled every corner. The family that made every day an adventure. The woman who had refused to accept his no and had instead shown him a better yes. As Kyle helped Daniel with his homework and Delilah prepared tea in the kitchen, he thought about all the men in Wichita who still talked about the bet he had lost. They made it sound like a defeat, like Delilah had conquered him somehow. They were wrong. Losing that bet had been the greatest victory of Kyle Thompson's life. And he would lose it again, 1,000 times over, if it meant ending up exactly where he was now, home, happy and deeply, enduringly in love with the determined woman who had seen past his defenses to the man underneath, who desperately wanted to be proven wrong. He had been proven wrong, wonderfully and completely. And every day for the rest of his life, he would be grateful for it.